Welcome to Season 1, Episode 26 of Digital Dissection, where we take a closer and possibly unnecessary look at our favorite properties. Today's episode is a very special one as we sit down with Josh Sawyer, Design Director of Obsidian Entertainment. Josh has been involved with designing some of our favorite role-playing games in his 20-plus years in the industry, and he has many stories to share. Our conversation with Josh was absolutely a privilege as he provides insights into gaming, his own personal development, as well as answering some of your fan-submitted questions. We hope you enjoy.
Before we figure out how Josh allocated all the skill points and what perks he chose for life's character build, we are Chelsea, Joe, and Mark, three friends that got to interview one of gaming's best designers and absolutely enjoy the time we got to spend with him. If you got here by accident, however, you can find us by searching for Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast shows. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also continue the conversation on our blog, if you like reading, that is. We write stuff. Yeah. Pay us a visit and check out the extra content we share during the week.
Joe, I remember my first interactions with Josh Sawyer. It was actually seeing his name in the credits of some of the games that I had been playing because I had always played RPGs from an early age, or at least was watching someone play an RPG. And I guess before we get into that too much, folks, you might notice that Chelsea's not on this conversation. She actually had an emergency wedding that popped up.
Yep, just a eloping that happened, and she had to be there for it.
Yeah, she's definitely there for her friends. So if you are a friend of Chelsea's and you need to get married in a hurry, she'll be there for you.
Yes. Whether it is in Wisconsin or in Vegas, she's going to make time for you.
Well, she was able to join us for this conversation, though. So, but it was, So Josh Sawyer is always a name that I kind of committed to memory because in the games that I had played, we were in the military, we were moving around a lot. And honestly, I like remembered the names of the people that were making the games I was playing. I would look at the directors, the writers, the designers.
Yeah, we are vastly different people when it comes to that. I'll tell you that. Like, I'm definitely like, oh, I've completed Pokemon. We've entered my Pokemon in the Hall of Fame. The credits are playing. I can't skip it, or I can set my Game Boy down, walk away, make some food, and I'll come back. So I generally miss a lot of the people who made games just because my attention span's that of a fly. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to this, this is just such a cool conversation. Josh is just one of the more interesting people that you would meet in your life, with his life experience and not only what he's done through like the gaming industry, but like we get to talk about his time he spent in the desert, which he used as inspiration for his video games, and just his life in college, and how he was a vastly different student than I was, but also a very similar student to many of my friends.
Well,
so they will probably relate to this,
including myself, because as you'll find out here, Josh's college years were obviously I still think were very well spent, but it was a matter of some things that I think a lot of people actually struggle with. So, outside of some of the interviews that Josh has done here, he's actually very, very in tune with his fans and the folks that like the games that he's made. And he ultimately ends up answering so many questions along the way that we thought it would be a very good use of our time, on this show to get into some of the areas that he maybe doesn't have asked very often, or maybe because I mean Joe, you know just as well as I do, we've been to Comic Cons and all kinds of these fan meetups where you get so amped up to meet someone that has had an influence on you that you're asking them things that they've probably gone through hundreds upon thousands of times, and especially when you have such a career as Josh has had in the gaming industry, rather than ask him questions about things that may have involved it might be knowledge that he may not have as intimate of a remembrance for anymore. I mean, there are some things that involve like gaming lore and the details of making certain games. Like it's, I'm sure it becomes kind of, I wouldn't say like forgettable, but I would say over time, you just kind of delete files in your head and and make room for other things. So
Yeah, but no, again, like I think if you follow Josh on Twitter or Tumblr or some of his other social media handles, he does a lot of answering over like, why he made a choice of the particular game that he did, or what inspiration they had for that. This episode, we didn't spend a lot of time doing that. We spent a lot of time just really getting to know him and who he is as a person. So if you are really interested to know more about like Josh as a human being, and not necessarily just like, why he did that, why he did what he did in Fallout, yeah, this is going to be a great episode for you. And again, like just super cool, easy to talk to. And I'm glad you brought up like, sometimes when you go to cons, you get kind of caught up in what's going on, and you don't ask what you actually want to ask, and sometimes you almost physically bump into Erica Durance twice in a very short period of time and make yourself look incredibly awkward. So we've made that not have to happen to you when you want to find out more about Josh today, because he won't be there for you to accidentally almost run into twice.
Yeah, I will say that this was easily one of the most interesting, one of the most enjoyable experiences that I've had with, an artist and creator that I'm very, you can tell I'm quite fond of Josh. He's been a very big influence on the gaming that I've done throughout my life. And so this was a very, very fun time.
Yeah. So without further ado, hey, let's just jump right into the interview.
Well, July has been a month that we've dedicated to the RPG. So we've explored the rich history of the earliest known inspirations of RPGs and coming into the modern age and the impact that RPGs have had on gaming, media, and literally shaping pop culture. So today we're joined by a very special guest who's been responsible for design and project direction for some of our favorite games. We'll mention a few of them here. Icewind Dale would be one, Fallout New Vegas, and Pillars of Eternity. But he is known by many names: Orpheus, Rope Kid, Baby Goat, and The Great Balancer, which I've heard he wasn't quite familiar with at first. But we do want to welcome Josh Sawyer of Obsidian Entertainment. How are you doing tonight?
Doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like we've rolled the nat 20 to get you here, to be completely honest.
Yeah,
this is pretty great.
I've been asked a lot of questions by friends of how we managed to do this, and to this day, I don't really know.
Can we reveal the secret connection?
I'm totally fine
absolutely,
with it. Yeah.
It's Chris Schmidt, I believe, is friends with at least one of you, and Chris Schmidt and I we both went to Lawrence University, and we're actually in the same fraternity. We're in the Phi Kappa Tau fraternity, so that's the great connection. So
excellent.
Apparently it came up in conversation. He said, "Oh, I know this guy." So yeah, it's just that easy.
True story. Chris and I know each other through Pokemon Go, which, looking at my face, you can't tell that I actually get out and explore, right?
Catching those 10K eggs.
Well, Chris and I were talking about, he listens to the show, and he actually won one of our random Twitter contests, which was really weird because there's like 600 different people involved in this drawing, and somehow Chris Schmidt ends up at the top of it. And I go, nice. I didn't even know you were following us. So it was just really funny. We get to talking, and as soon as he mentions that he went to college with you, I kind of stopped dead in my tracks, and I went, that's a name I've had committed to memory for almost 20 years. I mean, I grew up with his games and stuff he's worked on. So once again, we can't thank you enough for being here. It's really, an honor and a treat to get to talk with you about, some of your career. But, similar to other discussions that we've gotten into, especially since there is that Wisconsin connection, right? Joe and I have traversed Fort Atkinson quite a bit, and being hobbyists, well, Chelsea too. We all like to collect stuff. We've been all over the place. So I guess when it comes to Fort Atkinson and and growing up in Wisconsin. I was just really curious how you got into playing RPGs and just really the inception point for you there.
Yeah, it's so I think one of the things that's really challenging that might not be obvious as much anymore is that in the 80s, which is when I was growing up, finding people who played D&D in a small town, a small Wisconsin town, was kind of challenging. And I just happened to be friends with a guy named Ryan Niemeyer, I believe. I believe Ryan was the first guy to introduce me to basic set, which is Red Book or Red Box Dungeons and Dragons. And we played that, and then we played Expert, and that was really cool. Ryan also had a personal computer. My family couldn't afford a personal computer at the time, but he had an IBM PC. It was EGA, so it was like 4-color. And he played Wizardry, Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord, and he played a couple of other things on it, and that was really cool. But I remember there was one day when I went to the Dwight Foster Public Library, which is the library in Fort Atkinson, and I saw an older kid on the Commodore 64, which I had not experienced at the time, and he was playing Bard's Tale 1.
Yes.
And I lost it. Like because it was full color. He let me like listen on the headphones because I think he had headphones. I listened to that and it sounded like, because the music on the Commodore was really like way better than any of the Apple stuff, or IBM PC stuff at that time. And it had animated enemies, and I was just like, this is incredible. So I got really into it, and I was quite a bit younger than that guy, Tony Unati. And Tony introduced me to his friends. They were in middle school at the time. How old was I? I was still in grade school. They were in middle school. But they were playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, first edition, which I didn't. I was like, oh, I didn't even know there's this whole separate thing here with hardcovers. And he got me into playing. I started playing AD&D with them, and I guess I was about like 11 or 12 or something like that. And then it just took off from there. And so I played a lot of tabletop, especially D&D. But then later on in high school, I had some friends. My friend Brian Calise especially was really into Call of Cthulhu and some other games. He was also like, I think he and I both started like trying to make our own systems. By the way, now thanks to the magic of virtual tabletops, I still play with Brian and most of my high school group like almost every week, which is really cool.
Awesome.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it's really fun. Because like I would say maybe 10 or 15 years ago, it would be like if we were all in town on vacation, like for Christmas, we'd be like, dude, let's get together for one night and do a one shot. But now that Discord and virtual tabletops are around, we talk pretty regularly and play. Well, now we've moved to doing one big session once a month because the overhead of the little sessions was kind of getting annoying. But anyway, we still play quite a lot. And we've played, I know they've played even more than I have, but I've played in a 5th edition D&D game. And then we're currently playing in a cyberpunk game using the Savage World, what is it? It's Suede, Savage World Adventure Deluxe Edition, which is pretty cool. It's a very swingy system, but the friends are what make it good. So it's been fun. That's how I got into it, and it kind of just took off.
And I definitely can appreciate the scarcity of trying to find folks to play the games with, because my dad was in the military growing up, and so I would play D&D if I could find someone. And typically it was not something easy to do. We didn't have the technology. We couldn't build it yet. But at some point we would. And I think what's actually really cool about the area, even though COVID kind of hamstrung this a little bit, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Nexus Game Fair that takes place in Milwaukee now.
No, I have not.
That is basically, my power almost kind of My lights just flickered over here.
It's okay. You may have to just like pull things down to just life support over there.
Yeah, yeah.
Divert all power. Just keep this conversation going.
Well, what I just can't believe is that the Nexus Game Fair even exists, because you can walk into this place. Pretty much everybody's playing tabletop of some variety, and you can just walk up to a table, introduce yourself, play around, and move on to the next. And so I really love the fact that it took a little while for society to catch up, but I really just think when it comes to RPGs, it was more of a communication thing. I really do think that people always had an affinity for fantasy related things. There's a lot of entertainment value that's there. And granted, there were some steps along the way that I think were really helped out by Tolkien's works with the original inspirations behind D&D, but then also the cinematic Lord of the Rings movies that came out, and I think that's really kind of creating a firestorm at that point. But yeah, so that's really cool though. I really appreciate the sense of community that you have with it, because that's really what it's all about. And it's awesome to hear you doing that, years later. But yeah, speaking of going back to Lawrence for a minute, because my wife is from the Appleton area. It's a
Fox
for there
River
being
Valley.
Yeah. I'm not too far of that myself, and I live in the Stevens Point area, so I am just a small hop away.
I honestly, my father-in-law lives just off of College Avenue, and so we get up there quite a bit. But I actually want to spend a little bit of time here, because if you look through some of the wikis that are out there that cover you, or even just some of like the known Josh Sawyer stories, right? It seems like Lawrence is it's always like a really quick blip, in your life's history. And I was always curious to understand a little bit more, about your time, because there's got to be some influences that came out of that college that, it was a formative time for you, right? So I was, so definitely interested in hearing a little bit more, about your college life and what that was like.
Lawrence is it's always weird talking to people about Lawrence, because it's weird in a lot of ways, especially to people that went to like UW-Madison or something, because Lawrence, it was and still is the most expensive school in the state. It was 1,300 students when I went there. I think it's 1,500 students now. Like when I left, it was $23,000 a year tuition. Now I think it's like almost 50. It's maybe it's higher than that. Like it's crazy. They're on trimesters.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So we have 10 week trimesters, and then freshman studies, and the whole campus is really small. And granted, there are places like St. Norbert's and other or in the Carleton, St. Olaf, if you will, it's not like it's a completely foreign thing. But, most of the people that I knew in high school went to UW-Madison, or they went to UW-Whitewater, because it's right down the road.
Yay!
We are all three graduates of
all
UW-Whitewater.
So is my brother and my sister, and my dad went there. And actually, it's funny. So we at Obsidian, we have a small but consistently solid contingent of Wisconsinites, and the producer on my project right now, Alec Fry, also went to UW-Whitewater. Nice. So it's just this kind of funny thing. But yeah, the Lawrence difference, all caps, is it's an interesting thing, and it's certainly, I will say, like I've kind of said before, that in a lot of interviews, that I kind of wandered a lot, and I've been extremely lucky. I think most of my fortune is really fortunate. It's not like I worked harder than other people or anything. Like, if anything, I probably worked less hard than a lot of people. But well, because in high school I wasn't a diligent student, and I became even less diligent when I was in college, and I realized I could just kind of screw around, figuratively and literally, like all the time. So when I went to Lawrence, so I will say my dad is an artist. My dad is a bronze sculptor. If you've seen I think if you've seen almost any sculpture or statues in Fort Atkinson, then you've seen my dad's sculptures.
Oh.
Very cool.
He also sculpted the bronze fawns. That's almost
Yes.
certainly his
Oh
yeah.
yeah, who
most
hasn't been
notable
with
thing.
the fawns?
Yep. And so I really wanted to be an artist growing up. I wanted to be an illustrator, because I wasn't very good at sculpture and I didn't have the patience for it. But I really wanted to be an illustrator, and that's really what I focused very intensely on doing until I was in high school, and I kind of lost a lot of my interest for it. And I shifted over to focusing on music, which was something that I had done with my dad, because my dad was also just a musician. And I wound up actually toward the end of high school, I was like, oh, I'm going to go to a school for music and theater. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a musical theater person for professionally. Sure, why not? It certainly seems more realistic than saying I'm going to make video games. So this is the long version of the story that I'll tell. I applied at Luther in Decorah.
Okay.
It's the alma mater of Craig Engstrom, who was my choir teacher at Fort Atkinson.
Okay.
And that went really well, but it was out of state tuition, which it's crazy because like it was much cheaper than Lawrence, but Lawrence had much better financial aid overall. And also Decorah is very pretty, but and I'm not going to try to say that like Appleton is like the big city, but Decorah really is like out in the middle of nowhere.
It really is. Yeah, I've been there. I had a friend, a coworker who went to Decorah, Iowa, also Luther, and yeah, it's definitely a small town.
It's a small town. It's very pretty, but I was like, I think like, and my family didn't have a ton of money, so I was like, okay, I'll go to Lawrence. And yeah, so I went there initially I was in the Conservatory of Music, and I was going to be a double major in music and theater. And like I said, I was not a very diligent student going in, and the music program is very serious at Lawrence. Like the conservatory is like you got to work. Like it's very tough, and then it's one of those schools where basically a full course load for a conservatory student in terms of hours that you actually have to work is a lot more than most other students have to do. So they're really trying to weed people out, and it worked. So so yeah, I was a vocal performance major, and I dropped it. I didn't drop out of the school. I dropped out of the conservatory and switched over to the college, and was a history major. And I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun at Lawrence. I will say I was still not a good student. I did not take as much advantage of it as I should have. I played a lot of tabletop role-playing games while I was there. There was a point in time where I was in 4 campaigns. Like I was running one and playing in 3 other campaigns.
Wow.
So
yeah.
Like I was on academic probation twice. But the thing is, it wasn't that I actually liked the classes. I just was not, I was like 20. I just, there were so many other things to do that were fun and cool. And yeah, but I still feel like I got a lot out of it, despite the fact that I didn't put as much into it as I should have. I certainly think that it is a very good school for academic. Like if you really want to be like, yep, it's serious academia time, like it's a good school. And I do ultimately think that most of my critical thinking skills, which are very, very important to me, both as a director and as a designer, came from Lawrence. I mean, that's like, maybe I had a good instinct for it going into it, but I think that the process of actually going through and getting my degree through those trials, tripping and falling on my face twice, that was really important. And obviously there was other stuff that I did there. I was on the fencing team. Again, I did not take it as seriously as I should have, but I was on the saber fencing team, and that was a lot of fun. I still continued to do music and was in musicals and directed a musical while I was there, even though I wasn't actually in the conservatory anymore.
Sure.
And Trivia Master and all that stuff. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I heard that obviously the liberal isn't a big part of the culture there as well, from what I've been told. And then I've also heard that one of the frat houses likes to fill up their basement with sand once a year and has the big beach party.
Yeah, so some of that stuff is pretty hazy to me now. So yeah,
Can't imagine why.
No.
Well, I didn't drink at all when I was in college.
Oh,
wow.
okay.
I didn't start drinking until I'm 45. I started drinking 5 years ago.
After
wow.
you left the state of Wisconsin, that's new.
Yeah, far after
Yeah.
I left the state of Wisconsin. But no, so like Phi Kappa Tau is my fraternity, and
Mhm.
our parties we had private parties that had alcohol, but all of our like public campus parties were all dry. And I will tell you that they stayed dry because I was the sergeant at arms. And you can't tell, but I'm over 6 feet tall. I was 6'2" then, and I was about 250 pounds. So
Oh wow.
I couldn't really fight, but people took me seriously. So
Well, you knew how to fence, so
Yeah.
I didn't know how to fence.
And did you have the tats or the sleeves at that point in time?
No, I didn't. But
Okay.
actually, I had my head was shaved, and I did have, and I still do have, because it's a tattoo. I have the Eye of Horus tattooed on the back of my
Oh,
head.
that's cool.
Oh, I mean,
Very
I wouldn't
cool.
mess with that. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, so
No.
I couldn't fight. Like if anyone actually tried to fight me, I would be dropped like a sack of bricks in a second. But I did successfully intimidate people into not screwing around in our house. I mean, they still tried it, but I think I caught almost all of them. So, but no, there were, it's still fraternity houses on a campus, and there were certainly crazy parties at other houses. And I can't remember. You're right. One of the fraternities, maybe it was Delta Tau Delta, would fill the basement up with sand. But I can't recall. It's been too many years. But the reason I joined the Phi Tau house was because they did have dry parties. And most of the people in the house were fucking nerds. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
that helps.
we had LAN parties as rush events.
Yes. Mhm.
And a lot of the people that I played role-playing games with were members of that house. The majors, it was like physics majors, conservatory majors. Again, some of the smartest people I've met in my life, and yeah, it was a really good experience. I certainly enjoyed it a lot more than living in dorms. So yes,
No,
but it was
yeah.
not a party. It was not
Mhm.
a party house. It was the chill erudite house.
the gaming house.
It was the
Mhm.
gaming house, and now there
Yeah.
is actually a gaming house at Lawrence. So
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah,
Well,
it's a I think it's an officially recognized club. I went and actually gave a talk in, I don't know if it was 2013, around then, but I went, and yeah, they because the fraternity houses, something weird happened. The Phi Tau house, I'm going to get some of these details wrong, but something happened between Phi Kappa Tau Mu chapter, which is that chapter, and Nationals, where the Phi Taus chose to basically dissolve their charter. I believe volunteer, like basically the current members said we're done, and I don't remember the details, so I don't want to get it wrong. But there was also like some of the fraternities moved out of the houses and into other houses. Like I know the Phi Taus moved into a different place. It's very complicated because the campus is so small, Lawrence wanted everyone to be on campus. So the fraternity houses were all weird. I'm talking a lot about this. I hope that's okay.
No,
you're-
absolutely it is.
Definitely
Yeah.
is okay.
Totally fine.
But yeah, so that's how that went.
No, that's awesome. So like college, you said you're a history major. What area of history did you gravitate to, or did you study?
I really was intrigued by I wanted to even take this as a music major. So it wasn't like I just sort of spun a wheel and said history. Like I was already quite interested in history through theater. So like I got interested in Shakespeare's histories, which obviously are quite distorted, but the historical underpinnings of them were very interesting. And when I was still a history major, I should say, I actually, not only did I graduate with a minor in history, but I was the first person to graduate from Lawrence with a minor in history. Because minors were introduced. Lawrence didn't have minors until my junior year, and I was like, I'm jumping in because I already got a bunch of credit.
Yes.
Yeah.
But like I had done a paper for the late Fred Gaines, who was one of the actually I think he was the head of the theater department at the time, on Henry V, and comparing, Holland's Head versions of history as presented there with what we now know of records telling about the time. So I was really interested in that idea. And then there's a professor at Lawrence, Ed Kern, who focuses on magic, religion, and witchcraft in the early modern era. And I thought he was really cool. He was a good lecturer, and I was really interested in the subject matter. And I wanted to take his magic, religion, and witchcraft course as a freshman. And he was like, "Wait till you're a sophomore." I was like, "But I'm really into it." And he's like, "Just wait till you're a sophomore."
It's more PG-13. I don't know.
Yeah, it was mostly because it was an upper level history course, and
Sure.
at the time I had a 1.8 grade point average, so it probably wasn't like, "Ooh, I gotta get this guy in here." But no, so I focused a lot on early modern European history, and a lot of the stuff that I focused on was witch hunting, witchcraft, conceptions of it, also related but in some ways opposite, saints, hagiography, the sort of construction of saints and how that evolved in the church over time. And that was really what I focused on. Lawrence, actually, I think it was the first year that I started there, they changed the major so that, here's a funny story. So the major used to be very traditionally structured. And then when I was a freshman, they were like, "Okay, we're going to do a new thing where you pick a year and you pick a part of the world, basically." And that part of the world would be like the Americas, Europe, Africa, Asia, global and comparative. And the time would be, like a year, like literally like 1,000 of the Common Era, or like for me it was actually 1750, which really was a little later than it probably should have been. But and then what you had to do is you had to take the intro courses, and then you had to take 3 courses that covered that date in different parts of the world, and 3 courses that covered that part of the world in different time periods, like distinctly different time periods. And then after that, as a junior, you had to take historiography, which is the study of history.
Well, that's very meta. That's very
It's like, how did we get here academically? And then after that, you do seminar courses and things like that. But what happened is something happened in my class, my cohort, where they were like, "This is the easy way." So what they did is not me, I didn't do this, because I just took the courses that I was like passionate about. But a lot of these people were like, we can take a bunch of low-level courses that are like easy, that fulfill these requirements, and it's like easy train. So they did that, and then they went into historiography. Oof. And it was like they got hit in the face with a frying pan.
Yeah.
I want to say that like 2/3 of my class failed historiography the first time they took it.
They didn't pass the knowledge check.
No, it was very severe, because like basically they had been very, again, not that I was that serious, but I was more serious, especially in my major. But a lot of these people came in and they were like, "Holy shit, this is like really hard." I'm like, "Yeah, dude, it's an upper level, like this, it's real time, like this is the major, like you're doing the," and it was quite a wake up call. And I think a lot of people were like, "Ooh, I'm gonna have to speed up on this."
Well,
so is this also where you discovered your fandom for frog helms? Was during this time?
Where did that come from? I wonder if I can pinpoint it exactly. No, I think, like, especially playing, like, early D&D was so kind of obsessed with the minutiae of, like, first edition D&D had stats for like 30 different types of pole arms. And, like, it's like really into all these minute differences and things, and illustrated all of them. And somewhere, somehow, like, frog helms came up, and they're just so funny looking. And they're very funny looking, and they're really very purpose built. And I've had debates with people. I don't really think there's a debate, but they're jousting helmets. They're really made for jousting. And some people will argue that they were used for just like regular battle, and I'm like, I don't think so, because
terrible.
Because they were like riveted. So there's no, if you look at them, there's no articulation. So the frog helm thing, they come straight up. There's no articulation. So your head can rotate inside of it, but it's not like there's a articulated base or anything. And the reason they did that is because if you got hit by a lance in the neck or the head, you do not want your head to move at all. Like you would rather get knocked off the horse, because if your head, like, you would snap your neck, like you would just die. So the solution was a frog helm, and it's angled like that because it makes it very unlikely that the lance will, it's like you can still see out of it, but it's super high and weird. So it's purpose built for it. And every time I see it, it just looks funny to me. And so I like them.
So it meant to say that A Knight's Tale was bullshit then, from everything.
You know what? I was so I feel bad. I need to go back and make amends by this, but because that was like a mid-90s. Was that like a 95 or something like that?
Something like that, maybe late 90s. Yeah,
I was
somewhere
getting,
there. Yeah,
I was getting really angsty about history distortion in movies at the time, because I was a history major, and
so all of the movies were bad.
Braveheart was really big, and it made me really mad for a lot of reasons. So around that time, like any movie that really felt like it was being silly or like goofy with history, I was like, I'm not going to see that. And so Knight's Tale, I was just like, no fucking way, like not going to see it, and I've never seen it. So I need to. Well, I've heard people say like, no, it's actually cool, and I'm like,
well, I'm pretty sure that no neck articulation thing was the inspiration for Tim Burton's Batman costume as well. Like Batman doesn't need to turn his head; he's jousting.
Before we get too far away from Braveheart, I just want to say the Battle of Stirling did not occur in some epic halfway across a battlefield thing. It was literally like an assault over a bridge. They're crossing a bridge and they got attacked, and I mean there's only so much you can expect from Mel Gibson in an action movie, let alone a historical film. So, but tell you what, before we leave Lawrence, I wanted to do something kind of interesting, because I have an old friend of yours that checked in with us.
Cool.
And there's a couple things that I want to show you here. So let me actually do this real quick.
Some sharing.
Yeah, I'm going to share something with you. So here's a quick preview. So for those of you that can't see this, because we're a podcast, we're not doing video here. I want to show you this, Josh, because for those of you who are listening at home, what we're looking at is a box with a sticker on the side that says Appleton Recycles. Josh, is this shaking any memories loose for you?
I feel bad because it's not.
No, it's just a city's commitment to a cleaner Earth. That's all we have right now.
Okay.
I'm not recalling it. I feel bad, but it has been like 22 years. So
okay, and that's why I wanted to show you this photo first. So we're gonna go away from that one. So here is the second photo, which should definitely, I would hope, would shake a few things loose. And I'll describe the photo here in just a moment.
Yes.
Or I'll let Josh do it on his own if you want.
That is my full-size tower. That is when I was at Lawrence. So, again, I said that our house was like the gamer house. And building your own PCU was like really huge then. And I had like a mid-sized tower, but I wanted to jam, like I had 2 1 gigabyte, which at the time was crazy. I had 2 1 gigabyte Micropolis SCSI drives.
Yep.
So they were fast and they were big and they were so loud. Like they were not like so obnoxious. And the only, I'm embarrassed now, but like as a 20-year-old, I was like, totally fine, man.
Listen to that baby purr.
Yep. Like I can jam so much stuff on these, but I mean, you turn it on, you could hear it from like 50 feet away. It was crazy. And so it was a full, but they were like a full size drive is like two of those, or like two, it's like two of those slots high.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really big. And then I also had like a CD-ROM in there and a few other things. And like I played Quake all the time.
Yes.
And is this so either this is a current picture, like someone had this, someone kept this awful thing, or this is a picture from the late 90s and I was fucking disgusting because it looks nasty. I mean, I was kind of I was kind of a grosso in college, but this is looking pretty bad.
Well, I mean, the yellowing, that's all just accenting and texture adding.
Yeah. No. Once again, since we're a podcast and we don't have the video that'll go with this until later,
we will post the picture along with the episode.
Yeah, this will be posted. So we're looking at the behemoth. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Because it's stylized a little bit differently.
Yeah, I can't remember where that name came from. It was like a funny in quotation marks pronunciation. Yeah, I don't remember, but yeah, Bohemiath, I think.
Yeah. So to answer your question, this tower would actually have a bit of a journey after you left college because I don't know the name specifically, but I believe it went to your friend Matt, and I can't remember Matt's last name because I obviously don't know Matt.
Matt Cooked, maybe?
That actually sounds right. Yes.
Or Bourbon, could be.
Yep. So he had the tower, and then it ended up with Chris Schmidt's roommate after that, and now it is safely being stored with Chris. If you ever wanted to reclaim it, because this is actually a recent photo.
Okay, that does make me feel better. It does make me feel better because, like I said, I was not exactly the most clean living guy.
I mean,
college.
It was college.
Yeah. I know, but. Yeah. Still,
so you
being like, hey, remember how shitty you were? Like, yeah, I do. Thank you. Photographic evidence is also helping remind me. Thank you.
You may want to take.
I've never seen a picture that just looks sticky by looking at it, but that looked a little sticky.
That looked pretty nasty. So we can blame that on Chris.
Let's get a toothbrush and a little bit of Diet Coke, and we'll just start taking that grime off. Well, to shift gears away from Lawrence for a moment. So, I consider myself a cat whisperer. I've been around cats for a very long time. Now, I understand you have the animal friend perk in real life, though, that you're a big animal guy, and would love to hear about the animals in your life.
Yeah, so growing up, my parents always had a dog and multiple cats, and for some reason I never really bonded with the dogs as much. Like I liked them, but I was more of a cat person. And I now have, and as an adult for a long time I didn't have pets, and I had a girlfriend who had a really beautiful white cat. And after we were living together for a while, I was like, oh, you know what? I think I want to get a cat too. So I adopted this. It was basically my girlfriend's cousin opened the door one night, and a stray cat ran in and immediately ran into their laundry room and ran behind their dryer and gave birth.
Oh,
wow!
like she was ready to go. I think they had been feeding her, and she had been lingering around, and they opened the door and she was just like, time to do this.
Oh yeah, she's having the baby right now.
Yeah, okay. And she had two kittens, and I took one of them, Sesame, and she is I can't remember exactly when she was born, so I celebrate her birthday on Labor Day. Which is a movable feast. But she's 13. She'll be turning 14, and she's very, very sweet. And then my girlfriend has 2.5-ish-year-old Chihuahua pug named Coco. Well, named Cornelius, but we call him Coco. And he is a real sweet guy. And my parents have they've had up to 6, maybe 7 at one time, dogs, between fostering and just their dogs. But they have a lot of little dogs, like dachshunds and terriers and things like that. And Coco is a little teeny Chihuahua pug, and he's very cute and very sweet. And He's just finally kind of growing up and calming down and not being completely crazy all the time. But I finally have, for the first time in my life, like really bonded with a dog.
Yeah.
And even though he is very much my girlfriend's dog, I love him, and he's very friendly to me. So there's a concern. I think there's like a strong Chihuahua trait of being like one person dogs.
Yeah.
But Coco loves everybody. He's a super friendly dog. He's very sweet. He wants to go up, and I was recently, some friends came down and we all went out to eat, and he was crying because he wanted to be on basically everyone's lap. And like, so he would be on my lap, and then he would cry, and then I'd pick him up and put him on someone else's lap, and then he'd cry, and I'd bring him back to my lap. But yeah, he's a real sweet guy. So got those two, and the dog harasses the cat, and the cat more or less tolerates it. It's probably good for her, so she gets some exercise, but she's 13 years old and he's 2, so it's a little tough.
Yeah.
Well, going back to history for just a moment, and then we'll kind of get into some other things here. But as a son of a military officer, I spent a lot of time in museums, going to historical battlefields, and when we looked at, we just kind of checked out your Twitter the other day, and I noticed that you had a lot of pictures from the J. Paul Getty Museum. So I was curious, because obviously with COVID, things got pretty nuts as far as opening things to the public, as we all can imagine. But I was curious to understand, how much of your time is actually spent visiting museums based on your background, and I mean, you're obviously pretty well traveled. So ultimately, yeah, I mean, how much time are you typically spending in museums like the Getty Museum and others?
I mean, as a percentage of my life, not that much, but but like, I think more than the average person. Like, I really enjoy going to museums, especially art museums, and yeah, like I've been to the Getty, like at least half a dozen times, probably like closer to 10 times, for various exhibits. And I was saying to my so we went up there. I went up with some of the people on my team, and I was saying I always like going to an art museum as a date, because if the person is not into going to a museum as a date, see you later.
Yeah. Like, Joe, you can implement that one.
Yeah. Like if they're like, I don't like art, or I think museums are boring, I'm like, I think you suck. Bye. But yeah, like I just, my dad is an artist. Like when I was growing up, my dad had a lot of art history books around, and I would just read them because they were around, and I thought they were interesting. So I really like going to museums. I shouldn't say many years ago, at the end of 2015, my then girlfriend and I who is an art teacher, went to Munich, and then Salzburg, and then Vienna. And we went to so many museums in Vienna because I really like Klimt, the classic, of course, and then Egon Schiele, who is a little less well known. But in terms of Viennese artists, those two guys who were contemporaries, they're at the top of the list. But the problem is, much like Italian museums, in Vienna, if you want to see Klimt's, you're going to have to go to like 6 or 7 museums. And if you want to see Schiele's, you're going to go to 6 or 7 different museums, because they're not all at one museum. So you're going to go to like the Albertina, and then you're going to go to the Belvedere, and then you're going to go to this place, and then you're going to go to that place. And it got to the point where my girlfriend at the time was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't. She's like, look, they're cool, but I can't. She's like, I'm an artist and I can't go to any more museums. Like, I just, so, yeah, I love them. And not just sort of the classics. Like, I love Romantic era, late 19th century, but all sorts of art, from, medieval art all the way to modern contemporary. I love going to LACMA in Los Angeles, the Museum of Contemporary Art in LA. And yeah, so yeah, I love museums. I've always loved art. Between my dad and my first like long-term girlfriend, who I was with for almost 12 years, and as an artist, so much of my life has been with professional working artists.
Mhm.
Yeah, so love museums.
Nice. So is your dad still like sculpting? Or
No, my
is he
dad,
retired? Okay.
he is retired.
Mhm.
He makes digital art.
Mhm.
And he might occasionally take small commissions, but
Okay.
nothing on like the scale of the fonts. He's in his 70s now.
Gotcha.
So he does digital art. He loves Photoshop. He loves doing crazy
Nice.
photo
Mhm.
manipulations and things like that. But yeah,
Fun. Yeah, I just figured after current events, Milwaukee may want another bronze sculpture of Giannis Antetokounmpo.
yeah,
Yeah.
time to commemorate the
Yeah.
Bucks. I
Yeah.
mean, the last
Mhm.
time they won a championship was before I was born,
Yep.
and I kind of feel like when you're growing up in Wisconsin, it's like Packers, and you're like, oh, you
Yeah.
got the Brewers and the Bucks, and you're like, yeah, I mean yeah,
Yep. Yeah.
like
Mhm.
like because in the early '80s, like there's Raleigh Fingers, Robin Yount, like there were some
Yeah.
notable folks, but like it never really was like that serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But the Bucks were. I went to Bucks games, a few, and yeah, I never really like when I heard in the build up because I don't really watch sports anymore. The
Mhm.
build up to the Bucks being in the championship, I'm like, no,
What?
it's not. No, like yeah, I know people are
Mhm.
saying that, but this is like the Cubs where they're like,
Yeah.
but then like the Cubs, they did
They
it.
finally won it.
Yeah.
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 Mhm.
So congrats.
What I always love to say is you get into fist fights over talking the Packers, right? But you get into an impolite dust up when it comes to the Bucks and the Brewers because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just hard to keep a whole lot of emotion in that fight, right? You're like, it's
Yeah,
like, why are we doing this? What are we doing right now? Let's
they're
move
there.
on.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're around.
And I think
Yeah.
I remember because God, when was the new Miller Stadium built?
Oh God.
Miller Park.
2002.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
close enough to
Mhm.
when I left that it was like a thing, and people were kind of like, "Do we got to
Yeah.
do this?" Like they were like, "Look, I understand that we have a major league team here, but
Mhm.
Yeah.
do we really got to do
I mean,
this?"
we can at least go see what our tax dollars just paid for. Maybe.
Yeah.
We're not into it.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm a patron of this park. I would like to see its wares.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of heading on out to California, ironically enough, at the time around your college days, that was actually when my family and I lived out there, and so we would actually go to LA every now and again because my family lived that way. My mother's family lives out there, so
Yes, California way.
yes, we got the wagon and we went on out west, and
Didn't
so,
die of dysentery.
no, I got it, but I didn't die of it. But ultimately, it's curious to understand because obviously it sounds like it makes a lot of sense to go that direction just because that's where all of these companies are. That's where the technology is, right? But I was interested to understand a little bit about how you landed your first job because I understand that you were actually in roughly about 60 different people for your first position for consideration.
Yeah.
So I was curious to understand how you separated yourself there.
Yeah. Again, extremely good luck and timing. Like, so I had to stay because I switched my major and I was on academic probation twice. I had to stay 2 extra terms, which is not a full year. It's Lawrence. So I had to stay 2 extra terms to finish my major and my minor. And so I was graduating in March. And so I was graduating with a history degree and a theater minor with a 2.4 GPA. And I was like, you don't know what I'm going to do with this, like for the first time. And I had taught myself HTML because this is the middle of the 90s. So I taught myself HTML and I got pretty good. I wouldn't say I was actually like a great web designer, but like I knew how to do it pretty handily and quickly and a decent amount of like photo editing stuff. And so I was making websites on the side, like I was doing, like professional, but still fairly amateurish, but I was being paid for it. I designed the tattoo or the website for Steve's Tattoo in Madison, and in exchange for tattoo work.
Nice.
and like when I was down there, I saw how the apprenticeship system worked, and I was like, you know what, like maybe I could use my illustration experience because I still was kind of doing art every once in a while.
Mhm.
I was like, maybe I could like be an apprentice, because I talked to them about like what's involved, and they're like, oh yeah, this and that. I'm like, well, I mean, maybe I could do web stuff and be a tattooing apprentice at Steve's, and then, you know, because now I know the people at the studio.
Mm-hmm.
That was my like plan. And, you know, it's like I've told people that I knew that I was going to make tabletop role playing games
Mm-hmm.
because I just did that in my free time. I didn't put together like, no, this is like a job. Or like
Mm-hmm.
if it was a job, I wasn't like, oh, this is my profession. So I didn't have that sense of, oh, a game designer is like a full-time job.
Mhm.
It was the thing where I was like, no, I'm going to make my own, because I was already doing it in college. I had like two or three different systems. My friend Jeremy Strandberg, who just had a great Kickstarter campaign for a game that he's working on. He was making his own system. I'm like, yeah, no problem. But I never thought about video gaming. And then my friend Michael Donnelly said like, hey, by the way, Interplay, Black Isle Studios in California, they have a web position open for some new role-playing game. Like, why don't you apply for it? It seems like you fit the qualifications. So I sent a really obnoxiously long cover, like, you know, and again, don't do this. I sent like a 4-page cover letter. It was really rambling about like all my opinions about like where role-playing games, like it was very dumb. But I mean, from it, they took that I was passionate about the field, I guess.
Yeah.
But my ringer thing was I knew Flash. I knew Flash 3, which at the time was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, moving shit and music and long load times that people with modems hate. But it was the hot thing, and marketing departments really wanted to see Flash in their websites. And I knew it. And yeah, like there were like, I think 62 candidates, and 3 of us knew Flash, or at least listed Flash on our resume.
Mm-hmm.
And their first choice was a guy who, I mean, from what I understand, he's probably a lot better than me, but he wanted to move to be with his girlfriend in Seattle, so he couldn't take the job. So I was the second choice, and that's how I got it.
Well, I mean, second's the best, from what the old rhyme used to say anyway.
Mhm.
So
I was the one who got the job. So
That's awesome. Because I mean, yeah, like you've mentioned before, sometimes it's about where you are, and I still think that, you know, with that 4-page cover letter, you know, you still positioned yourself to be there, you know, and to get noticed. But that kind of leads me into trying to understand a little bit more about, you know, your creative process and the methodologies you picked up along the way, because from everything that I've read about within game development, and honestly, just a lot of first jobs in general, sometimes you're not given the best direction, right? Like you're kind of thrown to the wolves. Sometimes you're expected to figure it out and go find the information you need, go find the help you need, right? So I was curious to understand if your experience in the gaming industry was about the same in the beginning. Like, did you end up having like a good path to follow, or was this kind of choose your own adventure?
it was it took a village. Like there wasn't really formal mentorship at Black Isle. Keep in mind, this is 1999. So, you know, I wouldn't say the game industry was like brand new, but like processes are still being formed, and there's a lot of just ad hoc, do whatever. And and so yeah, Icewind Dale was the first game I worked on, and it was a game that had no leads. There were no leads on the project. It was just, there was a producer, Chris Parker, and everyone else was like a junior to a senior, but there were no leads. So we all just somehow kind of worked out what game we were going to make without leads, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that it was a D&D game, and we were using the Infinity engine, and it was in the Forgotten Realms, it answered a lot, and it framed what we were doing pretty easily. Like, it wasn't like, hey, are we going to make a sci-fi game? It's like, no, like we're making a dungeon crawler in the Baldur's Gate engine in 14 months, which is what we were doing. So people just, you know, individual people showed me how to do things and what to do. And, you know, like I'd say, how do I do this stuff in dialogue? And one person would tell me, and then like, how do I do this in the level editor? How do I edit things in the stat files? And okay. And so like individual people taught me, and then when other people had questions, I would answer things for them, especially when it came to like the rules or the lore, because I think it's fair to say Colin McComb, who was a designer who worked on Planescape Torment, he and I probably had the most in-depth knowledge of D&D and the Forgotten Realms at the studio. So Colin wasn't on the project, so I was like the de facto expert on second edition D&D, AD&D, sorry, and Forgotten Realms. So yeah, we all just helped each other out, and in a way, it's, you could say it was like being thrown to the wolves, but everyone was very willing to help each other out because that's how they learned. So it wasn't a real structured mentorship system, and the team was small enough that you could do that. There was so little overhead that you really had to be laterally aware of what everyone else was doing. Like if something in my area was being referenced by Reg Arnado, who was another designer, like we had to talk through that and work it out. So it was pretty rare that someone was doing something that everyone else on the team didn't know about. So very good esprit de corps, and yeah, just a good combination of circumstances that, as always, that worked out in the end.
Yeah, it was one of those things I was interested in digging into because, I used to work in engineering staffing, and so everybody loves to talk about methodologies on the interviews, but then when you actually start divvying out tasks and planning out jobs, you can call it whatever methodology you want, but a lot of time it's just get shit done. Like we can have the meetings, we can call the methodology whatever we want, but sometimes it just becomes the worst group project ever. And not everybody's pulling the same weight every day, but ultimately, you get the job done. So, one of the things that I did read into, this is a little bit ago, was how in a game of D&D that you were playing, and I've titled this as part of our notes here for a reason, where you told your GM for the game that I don't just throw a fireball to the face of this boss that you're reading this giant exposition for. And so that idea of choice and crafting games with that in mind, I was curious to understand if you kept that mentality from day one, or if this changed along with your career as you continued to kind of climb the ladder and go through different roles.
No, I think I've kept it the entire time. I mean, at first it was sort of a naivete. It was kind of like, I think that we can approximate, if we work hard and plan well, we can approximate the feeling of being at the table and having that level of freedom and choice to do what we want to do. And obviously, like the first game I worked on, Icewind Dale, was pretty linear. It was also very aggressive and short, so we couldn't really do that. Same with Icewind Dale 2. But by the time I got to work on Fallout New Vegas, I still was embracing the same mentality where I was like, I want to let people fireball the guy in the face. Like, you get one chance. There was a rule in New Vegas, which I've said many times, which was basically, if you like hit a trigger or open a door and someone comes through it, they get that conversation and they're fine. And then once that conversation ends, if the player has a line of sight to them, they have to be we must allow the player to kill them. And if it's special circumstances, you can put them behind an intercom, or you can put them behind like reinforced glass or something like that. But for the most part, I just said, like, no, like, let the player do what they want to do, because that's what we do in tabletop. I mean, some DMs, I think, violate the spirit by, like, plot critical NPCs that you can't kill. But I think that the true spirit is to kind of just let what happens happen and have the world react in a way that seems plausible. And that's what players enjoy, is the ability to like poke at that. And they don't want to do it all the time, but when they want to do it, they want to do it. And to accommodate that, you must allow them to do it everywhere. So that's really, that mentality has always, and obviously, like, my understanding of how to make that happen or how to support that, ways in which you complicate that or make it impossible. That's with experience. I've learned what's necessary to do that. But I've always carried that idea that at our best, we're creating a single player role-playing game with no DM present that can capture the spirit of letting you playing your character the way you mechanically have defined them and personality wise how you've defined them, and that the story reacts to that. So I can say I have built this character mechanically and I can play the game in this way, and it's rewarding in a way that feels, if not unique to me, certainly different than a lot of the other ways you play the game. And also I have an idea for a personality of this character that I can not only express, but then the story takes that and feeds it back to me, so it feels meaningful. Even if the overall story doesn't change, that push and pull feels like when you're sitting at a table and saying like, I smacked this guy in the face, and you're like, oh my God, he freaks out and all this, like, you know, or like, I'm a smooth talker, I charm the pants off this guy, like, you know, whatever, like whatever that fantasy is mechanically and personality wise, just trying to make that come true, which is a big challenge, but that's at the heart of everything that I've been trying to do.
Yeah, and it's something that can definitely take a player aback a little bit when they're not used to being able to do that. Because, for instance, in Outer Worlds, when you run into the first character you can physically interact with, and you pistol whip him once in the face, and he just drops dead, totally just throws you back. You're not sure what to do after that.
So I may or may not have done that, Josh. I mean, I was half of it was trying to understand how did pistol whipping work, but I still had to live. I work like that.
It works really well, as it turns out.
Had to live with that consequence. But you know, ultimately, on the topic of Fallout New Vegas, you've answered a lot of questions on Fallout New Vegas. But one of the things that I actually took quite a bit of interest in was watching you do your live play for charity. And one of the most interesting stories that came out of the amount of time you're playing the game had to do with your prep, and one of the trips that you took to a very special canyon that you told a near-death experience story with. I was really interested to understand a little bit more about this experience for you, because for those that haven't seen this live stream, we'll actually link it in the episode notes here, where you actually tell this story. Pretty harrowing, though. I mean, it's literally a survival story, near-death experience, and I was interested to understand what came out of that for you as a creator and a developer, because I imagine that has to at least give you a couple different angles from the prep you had done before.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I was not as prepared as I should have been, like materially and sort of mentally. You know, I had this really nice day pack. Like, so gear wise, I had a lot of good stuff, but I didn't really have, like, I had not done overnight trips before. I did not really do I didn't do diligence about like my nutrition or water. Actually, no, I did diligence on water. I just well, I'm not going to say I ignored it on the last day, but like, the nutrition problem is what caused the hydration problem in the end. So it's also deceptive, because the beginning of that trail, so I was backcountry. I'm not going to tell the whole story, but I was backcountry hiking in Zion. And so instead of going to the Zion Valley and exploring the Narrows and all that stuff, or Angel's Landing, I was starting at the western end of the park called Canyon, and then coming in. And when you first come in, you go past I think it's Laverkin Creek, and it's very lush, and it's still hot, but like, because it's along a creek that's pretty fast flowing, you're like, oh, water, cool, like what a bounteous paradise. And then from there you go over to something called Hop Valley, which is a big meadow with free ranging cattle, and the river goes through that. And then when you climb up out on top of that, then you're getting more into like proper Zion, like pretty dry. And yeah, I like, you know, I had a concussion like about a few months earlier playing soccer. Great. But I hit my head twice on the first day hiking, or no, once on the first day and then again on the second day. Like in the same spot both times, where I'd had the concussion. So I was like, holy crap, I almost stepped on a rattlesnake on the second day. And I got in, and so I had this idea of going all the way to the rim And I don't remember exactly what happened, but I was like, no, I should turn around and go back. And yeah, I hiked out, and the long and short of it is I didn't bring enough nutrition. So I had a calorie deficit of like 2,000 calories,
Ooh.
but I didn't register it physically.
Mhm.
But what was happening is I was sweating all the salt in my body out. And on the last day, something got in me where I was like, I'm going to hike out of the valley today. Like I had hiked 24 miles in 3 days.
Jeez.
Ooh.
And then I was like, I'm going to hike back out today. I did, but I did almost actually die.
Wow.
And it was because I suffered hypotonic dehydration, which is basically there's no salt left in your body. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but like your body can't retain water. So I was drinking water at this because I was hiking so fast. And I was drinking water, and then within minutes of running out of water, because I didn't realize I was sweating it out almost as soon as I consumed it, because I was just filthy. And when I did run out, within 5 minutes, my throat started swelling shut. And immediately I was in incredible pain. Like I felt great the whole day. That's why I was like in my mind, I was like, I'm going to get home tonight. Like I'm going to hike out of the canyon 24 miles. Then I'm going to get into my car at night and I'm going to drive all the way back to Orange County. That's how confident I was. And I did get out of the valley, but like I at one point I fell on my hands and knees because I was like, and I really thought I was going to die. I had no food left.
Wow.
I had no water. It was when I saw like wet mud, I was like, can I suck on this?
No.
Like, I mean, like very serious. Like, it was very desperate. Like, that's why I'm saying I'm not like, I really was very close to, I could barely walk. Like it was very bad. And thankfully some other hikers came across me and gave me water and helped me get out. But the things that I learned, so I gained a lot of appreciation for Zion as a place, which I had seen, obviously, I was familiar with the Narrows and I camped there once before in Angel's Landing, but like the whole landscape of it being a very, like having these lush areas around the water and then high and low parts and like the great variety to it. It's beautiful all over. So I gained a great appreciation for that. And just how dangerous really it is to be alone out there and like trying to survive in a place like that, which I think, like obviously surviving is a theme of the whole series, but I think it just gave me a little more of a personal connection to it. And the other thing I'll say is it traumatized me about dehydration, like to this day. So I want to say like a year or two or something after that experience, I saw 127 hours.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I knew what it was about, but there's the scene where he's like, the scene where he's stuck. So most of the movie, but there's a scene where he imagines kind of like flying, not physically, but like his perspective, like flying out of the crevasse and going all the way back to his truck and like into a bottle of water that he knows is in the back of it. Like that is exactly the feeling that I had when I was dehydrated. Like I was just envisioning flying, like astrally projecting back to because I had water in the back of my thing, and it was such a like I don't really usually have very strong reactions watching movies. Like I mean, I get emotional or whatever, but this was one where I was like, "Whoa, yeah, that's really real. Like that's very, very, very real." And like, whoo. And yeah, there was something recently I was at where I ran a little low on water, and it's like basically as soon as I really start feeling dehydration, I freak out. Like it was I did a bike ride on the Solstice in Angeles Forest, and I ran out of water with like a mile to go, and even though it was only a mile, I was like almost hyperventilating because I'm like I'm gonna die, and like but there were all these people around, so there wasn't really a real chance of that happening, but because of that trauma, I was like, oh my God, like I need water right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, great experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Thanks for bringing that up, Mark.
Yeah, I mean,
Hey.
it sounds like a perfect vacation.
The reason why I wanted to bring it up, and this isn't to necessarily, bring up too many traumatic experiences, Josh,
Sure.
but it was because when I heard that, even though this live stream, you can't see the faces of the people who are listening in, I mean, I thought this was something that everybody felt the same way about. We heard you tell the story, and it makes you realize just how quickly things can change. I mean, and not just in life, but I mean, I don't want to say that life's a video game, but in a lot of ways, you're basically playing survival mode every day, right?
Yeah.
So, so to that point, that's where the three of us on our show last week and the week before, we were actually debating a little bit about the heart and soul of RPGs, because there's a big difference if you especially track from the earliest days of RPGs as they evolved into video games, and then what we have now. Some people like the action-based RPG. Some prefer the turn-based. Obviously, you've got experience with both. And especially with the rise of isometric games again being, there's people who love these games still. We were all trying to figure out in our minds, what is an actual RPG by definition? And so I was actually interested to ask you about this, because I feel like out of the people I know and the people I've been introduced to, you're going to be one of the most qualified to answer this question. But yeah, as far as the lifeblood of an RPG goes, I mean, where do you really fall on defining it within this action and turn-based, world we kind of live in?
Yeah, I will say, I recently had this discussion with someone else where I basically said that I don't really care what individual people think about the definition of RPG. Like, it's not something that I have any interest in fighting over. I will say that when I say that I want to make RPGs, in my mind, I can define two categorical things. My mechanical role, which is varied and allows me to have a different experience mechanically in the game, and personality-wise, which allows me to influence the story in different ways that feel meaningful. And if I have those two things, it can be a first-person shooter, it can be turn-based, top-down, it can be a tactics game, really. Like, it could be a bunch of different stuff. Like, it could be modern day, it could be urban fantasy, could be biblical role-playing. Like, it could be whatever. Like, I don't think it's specific to the setting, really. And I think, like a game like Disco Elysium is actually a really, really, really great example of how if you looked at it, someone initially might be like, what in the world is that? If you play it, it's very clearly a pure RPG, even though there's virtually no combat in it. And the only combat that is there is not combat in the way that you would normally think of it. And the setting is very esoteric and unique. So it's not fantasy. It's a little sci-fi-ish maybe, but it's more like just an alternate world.
Yeah.
But it's a role-playing game. It's a role-playing game, and that's all that I need in it. So like, if it can be a fast-paced, clicky Diablo-style thing, except the Diablo doesn't really allow you to influence the story in any meaningful way. So that would fail. And this isn't about like a gatekeeping thing. It's just, if you said to me, hey Josh, do you want to make a Diablo? I would say, like, mechanically I think that's cool, but I would like to do something where you could do something in the story, maybe not constantly, because that would be against the spirit of the action loop, but maybe there are like specific story junctures where at the end of chapters I can like do things and see cool endings, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's a role-playing game. If it feels like I really have a character with a personality that I can play out, that I define, and the story really meaningfully changes, then yeah, sure, I'd make a game like that. Same thing with the tactics game. Like, if you took a game like Final Fantasy Tactics, but you added in a layer of, because it's funny, a lot of people haven't played Tactics, or they kind of forget, but like a lot of people, for good reason, think that the story in Tactics is one of the best stories in the Final Fantasy franchise.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could, I'm not going to say easily, but like I think you could take that structure and put in like branching narrative choices at those conversations. Obviously, it's a bunch of work, but that would be like really cool to see. Like, you know, actually a great example of this would be the Banner Saga series. Banner Saga is essentially a strategic RPG, tactical RPG, but it has story moments where you have to make these critical this or that decisions, and it has big impact on the story. So that to me is a role-playing game, and the fact that it's whether it's grid-based or arena-based, or I don't care about any of that stuff. So
yeah, and fair enough. And that's honestly that's where we really got into the same territory. If you guys remember from our episode on like literally breaking them both down, we kind of came at it going, there are certain games that were turn-based that we really loved that we wished would have stayed that way, but they shifted towards action. And occasionally you have them where you can toggle between both, right? But moving away from some of the titles that did this, that's really where we kind of got caught up was, and we called out Final Fantasy 15 specifically, not because we were trying to tear them down, but more because we were reminded of the experiences we had being able to, like you mentioned, make these tactical choices and do these things as opposed to smashing a button until something stops moving. Yeah. You know, it's that's what brought us to RPGs. And so I'm not saying I needed to hear it validated or anything, but it's refreshing to hear your take on it.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's kind of like like the love of like being able to really have an impact on the world you're playing in or the story that you're a part of. I mean, part of the same reason like we love like the Telltale games. Like there's not like a ton of action to them, but like all the little choices you do in those games builds up and changes what's happening in the long run.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, speaking of making choices, this is probably a little less video gamey, but more about your career, because we wanted to once again kind of talk about the things that we don't really see about you out there. And so you mentioned a little bit about your journey starting with web design. You know, you got into being a lead, you know, lead designing, project directing, and all that. Was this something that I guess came out of opportunity, or did you have any kind of approach to your career where, you know, there was rungs in the ladder that you wanted to achieve over time?
I think at first I didn't have any, like I was like, I want to design video games. Like I want to design games, I want to design video games. And my first project, there were no leads. So it was just a group of peers and I was like, that's cool. But I also knew that having a strong lead would help focus everyone in a lot of different ways. And we needed somebody to be the lead on Icewind Dale 2, which was a real pressure cooker of a project. And I volunteered, if I recall correctly, or I was volunteered, but either way, I said I would do it. So, yeah. And I think that I did a reasonably good job, although most of the people on that team kind of worked at their own pace, and we are all just running in the same direction. And I was kind of just trying to, at the edges, like keep them going in the same, like it's over there, like the end is that way. Yeah, and then what I found is in the years after Icewind Dale 2, I really found that having the lead design, having a structure where there's lead designer, lead programmer, lead artist, maybe lead animator, you know, lead audio if the audio team is big enough, that group of peers on the bigger, when the projects got bigger especially, there'd be a lot of disagreement, and sometimes it would be like intractable. And I knew that some projects had directors, and I was like, I think we should have directors on our projects at Obsidian. And initially the owners of Obsidian were like, no one man should have so much power. And I was like, no, I think one person should be. Like, it's not a power thing. It's about like having a vision to focus everyone around. And yeah. And so on Aliens, I worked on a canceled Aliens game, and it was really dysfunctional. And it was because and for a lot of reasons, but the leads couldn't, like we really just couldn't agree on things. And so we were all kind of working, not in opposite directions, but not in complementary directions. And it was floundering. And toward the end of development, I was like, guys, can you please make me the director and give me authority to like make these decisions? And they said, all right, sure, because like the project was in a very difficult state, and it didn't save it, but it did actually make a very big difference. So the difference between when I became the director, and I don't think it's by virtue of me being just that galaxy brain, but having a person who's in a position to say, I know you disagree on this, but like these are diametrically opposed things, so I have to give you a direction to go in that is a real direction and not just people doing whatever they want. And being able to do that did make a really big impact on the quality of the game. It was too late; it was canceled. But but that was enough for them to then on Fallout New Vegas say, okay, you've convinced us directors can be effective and good. You'll be the director on Fallout New Vegas. So that was the first game that we shipped that had a director. And basically there was a point in time where after years of directing, Obsidian no longer really had someone in a high level creative director position. And it was not great because there was not great mentorship and stuff going on, and there wasn't high level feedback being given to the teams about design, or if it was coming from people where it wasn't their discipline, like just the owners. And I said, hey, I think you should make me the design director for the studio. I think this was to Fergus. And he said, or actually it's Chris Parker. And he said, I didn't think you would want to do that job. And I said, that's not what I said. I said, I think you should make me the design director of the studio because the studio needs a design director. And frankly, I think that I'm the most qualified person to do it. Like, I don't know if this is the right, maybe this is a mistake, but like, I think that I'm the right person to do it. So it's been, let's see, I want to say it's been 4 or 5 years now. And I still direct projects also. So I do, it's a little bit of a tricky balance because I do have to give feedback to all the individual teams because we have multiple projects going on at any given time, and then directing my own project, which is a lot of work, but there you go. But well, in essence, I never was really like, oh, I'm going to be the one calling the shots for design at a studio. That wasn't really my plan. I do think that the idea of being a lead designer early on was appealing to me, and then a director when I realized like that position is valuable. And then once I was director, I'm like, this is definitely what I want to be for the rest of my career. Like if I had to pick one to be for the rest of my career, I'd rather be a game director than a design director for a studio, because I like having the vision and working with people to make that happen.
And something I thought was interesting too was, obviously you did, the vocals and music for some of the Fallout New Vegas tracks. And so I was interested to understand if there was anything else that was maybe uncharted territory for you in the industry, in the process, that you wanted to try out, but just haven't done yet. I mean, is there anything like that that's like voice acting, for example? I know you mentioned you haven't done any voice acting for any of the games that you've worked on, but I guess, is there anything kind of hiding out that you want to knock down next?
Not really. I wouldn't say that. Like voice acting is the thing where I don't really, I did a lot of acting in high school and college, enough to, consider it be, eventually be my profession. But voice acting is part of that. It's a separate set of skills, and I don't think I would I think I would be better at singing stuff for soundtracks than doing voice acting for games. And I'm perfect. And we work with such great voice talent that I'm perfectly happy to let the professionals do it. And even with the stuff I've done, like vocally, like with the Fallout New Vegas songs, that was like an emergency situation where I basically had to do it because we didn't have any other options. And I actually tried to keep all of those songs kind of in the background, because when I recorded them, I was like, this is pretty rushed. I don't really feel that great about the quality of them. So I said, don't put them on the New Vegas radio. And they're only when you do talent pool at the top. It's like actually really hard to get them to play in game. Like you have to do a lot of work to actually get them to play. But then Bethesda, when they launched the Ultimate Edition trailer, which they didn't tell me they were doing this. I saw it when it came out. They made Home on the Wastes, the song that I sang, they made that the song for the trailer. And I was like,
Oh,
what the fuck? And then a bunch of people were like, where's the song in the game? And they're like, oh, it's at the top, it's talent pool. And then they're like, this is the director singing it. Like, oh my God. But that being said, like, the thing is, I have an immense amount of respect for professional musicians. I went to the conservatory. I dropped out of the conservatory. I remained close friends with many of the people who were in the conservatory, and I'm still friends with some of them today. They worked incredibly hard to get to the level of education and skill that they have. So I'm grateful that I've been able to mess around doing some vocals, but like, I know my place. So like singing a little bit here and there is fine, but like, you know, the professionals are the professionals, and I respect their talent and expertise. So
Got it. Well, that's cool. We were thinking of ways that we could wrap up this conversation, because obviously we appreciate your time and we want to make sure you get back to the ones you love. But
yep.
So we did ask some of the fans here to ask a few questions to you, because we wanted to keep things more about you, but the fans naturally wanted to keep things about some of the projects and specific things that we just didn't want to necessarily take too much time up with. So Chelsea's got a couple questions she's going to ask you that are straight from Facebook, Twitter, and some Slack channels that I subscribe to at work.
And one guy who actually mailed in a letter.
Wow.
One guy was dedicated. He just got out a pencil, paper, and he just shipped this right to Chelsea.
Yep, I check my mail every day. So, all right. So here we go. We've got our first question. Were there tricky elements to creative freedom during the Pillars of Eternity Kickstarter? And given that this was the same time that the company's future was uncertain? Yes,
very much so. And, you know, I've received a fair amount of criticism for this over the years. Pillars, at least Pillars 1, the setting was very safe in a lot of ways. And it was very Forgotten Realmsy. That was very intentional. There were a lot of things that were D&D-ish. A lot of people were like, why don't you use D&D? And I'm like, well, because we'd have to license it. And like, that's the whole point of doing our own thing. It wasn't like necessarily like, God, I hate D&D, although I'm a little tired of working on D&D stuff. But just I've worked on like 6 D&D games, so that's enough. I still play D&D, so it's not a hatred of D&D. But like the fact that the company was in jeopardy and that the project was kickstarted, I felt more so than on really any other project, I felt like I had a responsibility to kind of cleave to pretty traditional stuff, because that was how we pitched the game. Like, you know, there are basically, some people have said, why didn't you pitch something more radical? We didn't think even the pitch that we had was going to get funded. So like the idea of like, we're going to do whatever the fuck we want, it's going to be crazy, like, or something like really esoteric. We, like, I just didn't think that people would want to fund that. Again, we didn't necessarily believe that we would hit the $1.1 million goal we had within 30 days.
Yeah.
It was hit within 27 hours. So like, obviously we were very wrong, but our mentality was like, we are desperate. We are asking people to do this. Let's not try to do anything that's like really out there. You know, other people, maybe they would have done other things, but that was keep in mind that I had just seen 40 people get laid off at Obsidian. Like from my project got canceled and my team, 40 people got laid off. That is, I've said it in the documentary, that was the worst day of my career. It was like extremely, extremely shitty. And like I was lucky to still have a job, and I was lucky that the company was still there. So in my mind, I wasn't like, I'm going to fucking do whatever I want. I'm like, I'm going to make a Forgotten Realms game. It's going to be really like Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale with a little bit of Planescape Torment sprinkled on the top, and
something fun but safe.
Yes, and that was really the direction I took it in, and obviously that had lasting ramifications, because in Deadfire we tried to kind of move a little bit away from that, but there's only so much you can move in a sequel before people are like, whoa, this is way different. So yeah, there were a lot of tricky elements like that where I was like, I just don't feel comfortable. I don't feel comfortable doing this knowing that people backed us in good faith, that we were going to make some, and there are still people that said like, you betrayed us. Like, this is nothing. I do think it's crazy when people say this is nothing like Baldur's Gate. I'm like,
Well, yeah.
Well,
Nothing like
nothing.
Baldur's Gate.
I mean, I did make both of those games. I can say, yeah, you can sure say there's.
I didn't work on
other
Baldur's Gate, but I did work on
Mhm.
Icewind Dale. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, like I made the choices that I made, and I feel like those, if I had to do it again, I'd still probably make the same choices. So there you go.
Great. That's perfect.
Mhm.
All right. Question number 2. Given your thoughts on professional sports, do you think developers in crunch culture are essentially the same scenario? How can we responsibly address this issue?
Okay, to give a little context, someone was asking me if I watch the Tour de France because I'm very into cycling.
Mhm.
And I said, no, I don't really watch any professional sports because they're so incredibly corrupt, at least at the very high people actually watch them internationally level. Football, everything with CTEs,
Yeah.
it's very, and how the players are exploited and how in their later lives, like, it sucks. And Tour de France, there's a great documentary called Höhlentour. It's translated into English as Hell Tour or Hell on Wheels, and it's about the German T-Mobile team in a Tour de France like 13 years ago or something. It's awful because if you're not one of the real elite riders in that, you're making poverty money. Like you're not being sponsored, and you're destroying your body. You're absolutely destroying your body. The stuff that the people on the T-Mobile team go through, and they're crazy athletes. Like it's hard to convey how nuts the fitness of a professional cyclist is. It's unreal. Like, sorry to tangent here, but like someone was saying, I have a friend who used to work at Trek, and he was saying they did like some group ride with like a long retired pro rider, and like a lot of the young bucks at Trek were like, yeah, I'm gonna fucking get one like they thought they were gonna beat this guy in this ride. And this dude, who I want to say was like maybe in his 50s or something, easily completely destroyed all these 25-year-old guys. Like not even close. Like, so the thing is, like, the Tour de France is full of people like that, and the injuries they suffer are incredible. The time they put in is incredible, and they're paid virtually nothing. So, and then there's all the doping and like all like the fact that also fans don't care.
Yeah.
Like there are so many people I remember, whether it's like, sorry to bring this up, but like when Kobe Bryant was dealing with the rape stuff.
Yeah.
I was living in an area where I heard people say, I don't care if he did it. And I was like, holy fucking shit, dude.
Yeah.
Like, what is wrong with you?
It's crazy.
So like you have or people who say like, I don't care if they're on 1 million steroids. Like, I don't care if they destroy their bodies. I don't care if they die at 40. And I'm like, what is wrong with people? So like, it's very hard for me to get into pro sports. Actually, that was not even the question, but so that's the context. But do I think developers in crunch culture are essentially the same scenario? I don't think so. So I will say that in pro sports, like the people who train like crazy and burn their bodies up and dope and all that stuff, they're probably going to win. Like, because the thing is, like, what they do is like, they try to, like a lot of these groups, they'll try to find the most naturally talented, who are the combination of naturally talented and also like will do anything to get the edge. Lance Armstrong. And and then they just go like go, and it works. At the back end, the ramifications are usually very awful for their personal health and like what it does to everyone around them and everything like that. The problem with crunch is that crunch doesn't actually work. Like, it's not actually comparable to like doping. Like if you EPO dope, you're incredible. You're Superman. You're beyond the bounds of normal human beings. If you crunch, you suck. Like, you do worse work. You get work done slower and the quality goes down. Like, I'm not going to say endless, but there's like so much evidence that says this, but people keep trying to pretend. Either a publisher puts pressure on and says, work harder. And they're like, okay, well, now we're going to crunch. And they're like, yeah, keep crunching. But it doesn't actually, a little bit. Like there are margins. Like you can basically, I did a talk on this where it basically, you can crunch people for like 50 to 60 hours for like a week or two every like couple of months or something like that. A little, and it will be, and you will get efficiency. Well, you won't get efficiency gains, but you will get productivity gains.
Yeah.
So in the fixed amount of time, you will actually get more work done, even if efficiency goes down a little bit. If you work people longer, like more hours or for more time, then it falls off a cliff and everyone gets insanely bad. So the problem is that people keep choosing to do this even though it doesn't work. It's really crazy. And when you hear about the games that do it, often when you hear about their development cycles, they're incredibly dysfunctional. So like there's no way that you can argue that it helped. Like it took a shitty situation and just made it even worse. So like, yeah, it eventually got done. And even if it was good, it was like, yeah, we tripped and like stepped on like 18 rakes on the way to the front door. But like we got it done, and they'll say, see, it turned out well. And it's like, well, yeah, you dumped 1 million gallons of water in the desert and you got like corn. It's like, well, but did you need to do that? Did you get that done that way? It's this confirmation bias that says like, well, it turned out well in the end and we made a lot of money and reviewed well, therefore crunch is good. And it's like, no. So that's what some people think about it, especially older publisher dev people, but like we can responsibly address it. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people have talked about unionizing, which is very difficult to do, especially in the United States. If we could, I think that would address a lot of those issues.
Yeah.
I do think that a lot of smaller studios are taking it upon themselves to have more ownership, and whether it's a co-op company structure like Scott Benson has is part of, I was going to say Glory Society. Oh man, he's gonna get mad if he hears this. But basically, it's a co-op. There's also like a Twin Motion who made Dead Cells, and their main branch for like 15 years was co-op. So that sort of structure obviously gives individual employees a lot more voice in that. I think a lot of it is getting out of the mindset and just demonstrating across the industry that what we already really know across multiple industries, which is that crunch does not increase productivity in the long run, and it burns people out, and it's not good. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, another fan states, you clearly have a very intimate knowledge of D&D, but based on your live streams, your affinity and enjoyment of Fallout is just as passionate. What settings or environments do you most like telling stories within?
I think I like, it's not so much the specific type of setting, but I like working in settings that have like material underpinnings. So a lot of this comes out of my history background and being a socialist, which is obviously like, okay, we're going to get it historical materialism. So being able to look at history through the lens of like, what were people doing to try to live materially? Because that's certainly like the lens, like it changes a lot of your perspectives on what was going on and why. Like, when a lot of people talk about the Crusades as like, well, this is religiously motivated. And you're like,
is it though?
Was it? It's like, well, that was certainly a pretext. And certainly I would believe that a lot of people involved in it devoutly believed that. But if there were not a material concern, it just wouldn't have happened. Like, a lot of the Crusades that happened, the people that went on them, they're like, cool, I'm going to get to loot a ton of stuff, and I'm going to be forgiven for all my sins while doing it. This sounds like a great deal. So I like working in settings, whether they're fantasy, sci-fi, where it feels like there is a material underpinning to the motives of the characters and the factions at work. I mean, obviously, play Fallout New Vegas, it's water and power. We're in the desert. Hoover Dam, Lake Mead, clean water, power. People fight over it, and they're trying to survive. And it makes characters' motivations just a lot more plausible. It makes the whole world feel a lot more plausible. Deadfire is colonialist, and the draw of the colonial powers is that there's a resource, Adra, luminous Adra, that is extremely valuable. I mean, think of gold or ivory or rubber or anything that colonial powers have gone in and said like, ooh, goody, we're going to set up shop here. And it's fantasy, but the material concerns underpinning it make the factions, I think, a lot more believable and plausible. And it also makes the choices you make between the factions more complicated and nuanced. And so I think that makes the role-playing more... I think it's best when those choices make the player kind of dig a little bit. Like, it's not a snap decision. They have to go like, well, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of complex things going on here. And then at the highest level, it then makes them go like, this is kind of like this that happens in our world. And so having the game choices reflect then back on like, how do I think about colonialism now? How do I think about the history of colonialism and the long-term effects of it and all this other stuff? So whether it's fantasy, cyberpunk, future, Western, modern, if we can have those material underpinnings, that's what I need to tell a good story, I think. From my perspective, maybe not other people's perspectives.
Yeah. Well, it's always a good part of storytelling or anything really is when there's some realism to it, and you can grab it a lot easier. Like I think as Jason Isaacs talks about, like when he takes roles, especially for villains, like if the villains are evil for the sake of being evil, he doesn't want to do it because no one believes that. No. But it's when like, like this guy like Malfoy in Harry Potter, it's like he's just an old racist. Yeah, he's a believable villain. I'll do that. So you connect to it that much easier.
Oh, God, exactly. That's great. Well, final question here. Where do you see RPGs going from here? We've seen that fans of isometric games are still here. Adapting turn-based worlds into action-oriented have been successful. What's the next logical step?
I think we're going to see a lot more games that are, especially in the smaller scale, indie games, that are doing stuff we haven't seen before. I mean, we kind of already know that the whether it's bigger studios or the bigger teams, at least because of the budgets involved, they're going to probably stick closely to established formulas while trying to innovate in one or two key ways without really rocking the boat. So, like Mass Effect was notable because it was a third-person shooter and a space opera, which is great. But in a lot of other ways, it was very traditionally RPG. And also into an area of, Star Wars-y. It's space opera, so it's not weird. But like Disco Elysium is weird. Like, I don't know if you've seen Lisa, the RPG. Lisa is so my girlfriend just played it, and it's really crazy. It was made by pretty much one guy, and the art style is really weird. The world is really weird. The story, everything is very strange. He did like all the music is crazy. And it's really out there, but it's actually like really compelling and really cool. And I was shocked. And then I learned he made it all in RPG Maker.
Oh,
wow.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. So I think we're going to see more people who are like, I like RPGs, but I've always wanted to do one in this setting or like with this type of mechanics or whatever. So I think we're going to see it come more from indie teams or small teams where they're going for a niche. They want to be niche. They want a small, passionate audience that is into whatever they're crazy. Like I could see a lot of people looking at Lisa and being like, what the fuck is this? Like, I think it's actually way more alienating than something like Disco Elysium. Like it's crazy. But there's like a very passionate core of people that love Lisa. And obviously Disco Elysium and stuff like that. So that's what I think is going to happen. I think you're going to see people that are taking that basic concept of like, I build my character, I make my role-playing choices, and I see them reflected in the story, but saying like, what about in this setting or with these mechanics or with this aesthetic? And again, like aesthetic, doing risky things with aesthetics is also much a very appealing thing if you're a small team, because you want to stand out, and especially if your graphics are simple, you want to do something bold and stylistic rather than trying to go for verisimilitude that you can't possibly support. So yeah, more games with neat art styles, neat ways of, exaggerated characters, or like just not even human characters, or like, just crazy stuff. I think that's what we're going to see.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So once again, it's really funny how our paths kind of converge here. So once again, I really do appreciate you taking the time with us. And obviously, if you're ever in Madison, I feel like I owe you at least some kind of alcohol now that you've been drinking for the last 5 years.
Gotta be a spotted cow.
Yeah.
Get them out here.
Yeah, and I feel like I also owe you a shot glass because on one of your live streams you were drinking tequila out of, I believe, an old honey jar.
Yeah.
That's too much. That's too much.
Yeah, it was a little teeny honey jar. Like, we drink shots out of that, and then my girlfriend has teeny sake glasses, but they're not. Neither of them are really like shot glasses, so it's kind of like, yeah, I may need to get a shot glass one of these days.
Wasn't a factor, I feel like we'd probably still be talking to Josh right about now. I could seriously sit and talk about really anything. I wonder if he's ever thought about doing audiobooks, even like a 1/900 work sort of thing. I really think he's got a career far beyond gaming.
Well, I absolutely agree with that. And we want to say a big thank you to Josh Sawyer as we officially close this chapter on our RPG coverage. We want to also wish Obsidian Entertainment and their crew the best of luck as they enter their next projects, as they continue to captivate us with their storytelling and unique player experiences. But next week, we're going to look inward, and not just because we desperately need some group therapy. We're going to analyze our own nerdiness and welcome some friends to the podcast for some topics that are a bit closer to the chest.
Doug Eberly, who you might remember from earlier this season, will be returning to talk about the games that made us, an ongoing series that will break down some of our favorite titles that had a major impact on our gaming journeys, including a few of his own. We'll also be joined by Jeff and Corey of the Switch the Envelope podcast. We'll be looking at the emergence of nerd culture and how it would go from esoteric to mainstream phenomena. We hope you're ready for a fun week with 2 full episodes.
And until next time, keep on dissecting.